Guys, so I thought I'd do a quick Facebook Live on the need for us to really get going on fundraising in the states to push back with legislation that we're working on. So right now, we know that we are looking at a really brutal January come legislative season. And so we have a couple months to work together in each different state. You know, in Oregon, it's a little bit different with legislation than, you know, other states. For example, in Colorado, they have to have all of their bills filed ahead of session, and in Oregon, they can run as many bills as they want, as long as they get those in by a certain date. Those don't count as they don't count against the 5 bills that members can drop anytime during the legislative session. And so all these states are so different, but the good news is that we can get model legislation drafted and then use those in each different state. So once it's drafted, it can be kind of tweaked and customized. Some legislators may want to add or take away some things. There's also amendments. You know, I've been doing calls with all of the different states that we're in, and I only have a little bit because we're going to do a call with Washington. But you know, in Massachusetts, Oregon, there's a little bit easier process, it seems, than other states, I'm finding out. But you know, we introduced 28 amendments in Oregon to House Bill 3063, and so those can be used to really take out the teeth of any mandate bill, or be used to, you know, really put these vaccine pushers on the spot and make them answer why they're doing these mandates. So if you think about, you know, an amendment that could be dropped to one of these bills that mandate vaccines, it's like, okay, well, we can mandate certain vaccines, but only if they've been safety tested in this and this way. So that's a really hard amendment to explain why you don't want it tacked onto a bill, right? So it puts them in a position of weakness while they're pushing these bills. So, you know, I just think if you think this year was crazy, it's only going to get crazier next year. And the other thing, I was talking to Sandra in California, who was really one of the star activists, I think. And you know, we talked about the fact that this next year, we all didn't know each other at the beginning of last year, going into last year. And the connections that have been built up and the support network built up across the country has been so changing, I think, of the political environment that we're working in. And so there's actually a lot of, you know, we have a lot of hope that's building up, and we have good energy, and we have the sense of urgency, I think, that wasn't there going into this year. And so 2020 is also an election year. People are going to be, you know, very concerned about their races that they have coming up that year. And so there are a lot of ways that we can not only stay engaged, but get other people engaged. And people are going to be more, you know, a presidential year, people do pay a lot more attention, I think, than in other years. So we have a lot of things working in our favor. But again, we have to fundraise. We have to fundraise, because we need to be not just pushing stuff out on social media. We need to be pushing legislation. And the costs involved in doing that, it can become quite high. And you know, a lot of these things require in-person meetings with people to get them on board with the legislation. So we need to fundraise to pay for the costs involved in drafting the legislation and getting really solid bills pushed forward. We have all these different looking mandates in the states, and it's like, well, you know, some are taking away medical exemptions, some are taking away religious exemptions, some are taking away, you know, seemingly every freedom that we have. You see what happened in California not just with the vaccine mandates, but the other bills, and then them taking away guns. But we have our work cut out for us, and so once we get this fundraising cycle finished, and we can get those bills drafted, then we can start working in the states to get those actually introduced and filed, because that's going to be really important. And you know, each state is going to have a lot of work to do, and so you know, we really want to use these 3 months, October, November, and December, while a lot of people in politics are starting to simmer down. We need to be using those to really like bring up our energy and get this stuff done. So do me a favor, if you can, share consciencecoalition.com/donate, and it can be a simple, you know, caption. You can just say, we're raising money, we're fundraising for drafting and introducing legislation across the United States to push back on pharma, because this is really important that we do this. And if you guys have any questions, you can of course message your state director. That will be really helpful, and I'm going to be continuing to do state calls with states and figuring out exactly where they're at, what they need, what they're wanting to do, see what's going on, getting the lay of the land for their state. There's a lot of infighting. More and more every day, it seems like, in some of these states. That is why New York and California fell. So we have to keep that out, and one of the best ways to start putting out that fire is not to run around screaming fire or infighting and running around trying to put it out. The best thing to do is suffocate it by not giving it any air, and so that's really important. But we've got this, you guys. We already are winning. It just, the legislation that was passed doesn't make it seem like, you know, anybody's winning with those bills, but those bills and the hammer coming down so hard this year is, I think, an admission that on their part, on our opponent's part, that they realize people are waking up in droves, and so they're trying to slam this hammer down, and it's not going to work. All they're doing is actually waking more people up. So it's kind of, you know, you can't just look at bad bills passing as like that's it. It's like, it's just beginning. And so I'm really excited for you know, seeing the next legislative session look very different than this last legislative season. So keep it up, you guys. Keep up the posting really good content. There's a lot of good studies coming out. You can see a lot of change is really on the way. So we'll just share this, and I think because I did it into Conscience Coalition group, it didn't actually go through as a live, but once it gets approved, you guys can